Good afternoon, Rochester Community Schools. I'm Mr. Thomason. I'm the orchestra teacher at Hart Middle School and Van Hoosen Middle School. And today for our virtual music lecture series, we are very lucky to have two guests with us today from the Columbus Symphony Orchestra. We have Joanna Frankel, the violinist and concertmaster of the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, and Daniel Walshaw, the vice president of operations and artistic planning of the Columbus Symphony Orchestra. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we are very, very excited to have you on today. Now, you have some very interesting musical journeys throughout the world. I know Dan and I went to college together, and you've been all over of the world, and Joanna playing on multiple continents. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your musical journey, how you started, how you got to where you are now? That'd be great.
Sure. Should I go first
You
then?
go first, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm Joanna. It's nice to kind of virtually see you all. I started playing the violin when I was 3.5. It took many years until it actually sounded like anything, of course. But technically, I was playing when I was that young. My father took me to a Suzuki group concert for something for him to do with myself and my two sisters. And I just really loved the violin. And I asked for the violin for a year. And then finally, when I was 3.5, my parents enrolled me in a Suzuki school. And I started lessons. I think I started with group lessons and then, quickly went to private lessons. And then I studied, I got pretty serious pretty quick. And I studied in different places. I grew up in Philadelphia. So I studied in Philadelphia, and then all the way through my high school, I was studying and practicing. It was, my main thing. I was practicing probably between 3 and 5 hours every day. And always kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. Never really strayed from it too much. It's not always easy, but really, I just always really loved the music, and I loved the challenge of it. So eventually, I was studying with teachers one of my teachers was a teacher at the Curtis Institute, and teachers who were playing in the Philadelphia Orchestra. And then when I graduated from high school, I went to Juilliard in New York City. I went there for my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. Juilliard is just a performing arts school with music, dance, and drama. So that was really exciting. And then after that, I stayed in New York for 3 more years, doing a postgraduate fellowship at Carnegie Hall, where I played chamber music, and I did education activities. I taught in New York City public school, had a violin class. And we did all kinds of kind of professional development, and kind of were trained in how to be a 21st century musician and artist advocate for the art form, and just really going forward how we could make our music relevant to future generations, and kind of changing things, going with the changes of the times. So we were trained with lots of different speakers and professional development and that kind of thing. And then when we graduated from the program, I was in the program for 3 years. I actually was doing a lot of chamber music and recitals kind of around the country. I was traveling. And one of the things I did was I got connected to an orchestra in South Africa. I went there to do a residency, which was connected to Carnegie Hall. And other residencies were in Germany, Spain, the Middle East, different places across the US. And so I ended up in South Africa, and I kind of got connected there, and the orchestra was looking for a concertmaster. And one thing led to another, and I decided to go to South Africa. And initially I was commuting, but then Daniel and I got engaged, and we needed somewhere to, like, the same place to live. So we thought, opportunity for Daniel, which they did there, we might move there. So we moved right after we got married. We moved to Durban, South Africa, and we lived there for about three years together. 3 years? Mm-hmm. 3 years. And my position I had for about 4 years. And then when we were in South Africa, we got connected to the music director of then he wasn't, but now the music director of the Columbus Symphony. And then when the concertmaster position opened up in Columbus, he asked if I would come and audition, and I was just very fortunate. And here we are today. So that's my very long and convoluted story.
Commuting all the way from the United States to South Africa, where you'd stay there for a couple months, or?
Yes, the orchestra was set up in such a way that there were 3 seasons per year, or 3 seasons or 4 seasons? 3 seasons. They had 3 musical seasons for the orchestra, and each one was like 6 to 8 weeks long. So, or 4 to 6 weeks. It's kind of depended. So I would just kind of stay there for the seasons, and then there would be maybe a month in between, and I would go back to the U.S. and do other concerts and do different things. And at that point, I wasn't sure I wanted to definitely live in South Africa full time. But then, different life things happen, and then we decided to kind of relocate there, which was really magical.
How about you, Dan? I know you.
I have a little more of a roundabout journey in life.
Yeah, and I know a little bit about that, and I know a lot of the students would probably love to hear. And some of them, when I was kind of filling them in on who we were going to be having today, I think some of them were surprised to hear that working with the orchestra, in many orchestras, your primary instrument. But I'll let you kind of go into that.
Yeah, so I was born at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing, Michigan, capital of the state you're in there. Grew up first in Williamston and then Okemos, Michigan, kind of the suburbs around Lansing. And then I had the great fortune of meeting Mr. Thomason on my first day at Oakland University in the music program there. And when I was growing up, I was really into music, but unlike Joanna, I was kind of scattered, and I'm still scattered now. I'm not somebody who can focus on things for a very long time, and I get bored very quickly. So I always find new things, but I was always playing guitar and all sorts of different types of guitar. And then eventually I got into classical guitar and composing, and that's what I ended up studying at Oakland University, and graduated. What year did we graduate, Keenan? 2006.
Yeah, December of 2006, yeah.
Yeah, 2006, with a degree in music composition and theory. And great time at Oakland, met some wonderful people, really great school. And Keenan and I got to witness the Pistons win the championship, and then slowly decline after that, sadly. And then I ended up kind of getting into orchestral conducting, and that was kind of through composition that I was developing knowledge of how music was put together, how scores were put together. And so I ended up going to University of Maryland to study orchestral conducting out in University of Maryland is in the Beltway of Washington, D.C. Studied there for 3 years and got a master's degree, and changed my life again. And started, while I was there, I was doing kind of a internship type thing at the Smithsonian in their musical instrument and musical history section. And through that, I was able to get a job at the music division at the Library of Congress, which is, first of all, it's the largest library in the world, which is great, and the largest music library in the world, which is amazing. So they have all sorts of, every composer you can ever think of. They have original copies of their music, but also everything that's ever been published in the United States, there's a copy of it there. So it's just absolutely massive. It's really fascinating. Joanna just has to run and check on our 2-year-old that's right now probably tearing apart his room. So I was working for the Library of Congress. I was also conducting a local orchestra there, and I got married to this wonderful lady, and she convinced me to leave my government job and move to South Africa, which was absolutely the right thing to do, and the greatest, both for the love of my life and just the adventure of my life, the greatest thing that we have ever done. And we just met marvelous people there, had wonderful musical experiences. And that's where I really got into what I do now, which is orchestral management. I was the artistic administrator there. So when you see an orchestra on stage, just like with your school orchestra, there's a whole team of people that make sure that that can happen, whether it's librarians or people who market and sell the concerts, to people who have to put the stage together, put the lighting together. There's always a whole team of people backstage that are making those performances happen. So I was an artistic administrator, so my job was to kind of put the artistic product together, pick the music, find the conductors, find the soloists of what our concerts were. A lot of contract negotiation, which is something I never thought I would do, but it's what I do now. And then we moved to Columbus, as Joanna said, and worked for the Columbus Symphony, and now I'm the Vice President of Operations. So I am basically in charge of our productions. I make sure that our concerts go off and are successful. And that's where we are.
And it brings you to where you are today.
The end. See you later.
I'm sure there's a lot more to come, right? I mean, this is just really only the beginning, you know. I feel like for a lot of our careers, and even though it feels like we've been in it for a long time, there's still so much more ahead.
Oh, I know.
That's true, especially for me, because I feel like I've been trying to do this. It just takes your whole life to play an instrument. It just takes your whole life. It takes all of your journeys and, you know, all of your hard work when you're younger, and then figuring out your place in the music world. It just takes forever. So it's true. I'm sure there'll be a lot more adventures.
Going back to playing and working in South Africa, one of the questions from one of the students was, what were some of the similarities and differences that you maybe noticed playing and working with U.S. orchestra and maybe a orchestra overseas?
Go ahead.
It's a very good question. So I guess the interesting thing about South Africa is that basically when, I hope I can get exactly the history right, but basically when the Soviet bloc broke up in 1990 or something like that, late 80s, early 90s. So just interject if a lot of the musicians in those places that were musicians and performing and working there, a lot of the support for their industry dried up. So they needed work, and this was a time when South Africa was kind of trying to expand its cultural presence as well. So actually, a lot of the musicians in the orchestra that we played in came from Eastern Europe. So there were Russians, Bulgarians, Romanians, eventually more people from different countries in Europe went there. So when you're thinking of, when I went there and thought an orchestra in South Africa, I wonder what that's going to be like, I actually went there and found a very old school European, Russian trained orchestra, which was incredible because it was a little bit like just going back in time to just really a golden age of playing. So that was, unfortunately at that point, there weren't many people of color in the orchestra. There still aren't that many, but there's programs to try to get more. Obviously, the population of South Africa is mostly people of color, not just white people. But that integration is taking time. So anyway, this orchestra was very European, people that really knew the traditions and were excellently trained. And but in addition to that, because it was about one generation after apartheid ended, the people that were then running the symphony when we went there were actually Black South African people, and they started to incorporate their own musical traditions into the classical world. Now, of course, it doesn't happen without challenges, but we did end up playing a lot of indigenous music, a lot of music with choirs, because choir is a gigantic art form there. Everybody sings in a choir, whether it's their work choir, their church choir, their hospital choir, everybody's singing in a choir, and they have unbelievable voices. So we played a lot of choral music, traditional, but also new music written by South African composers. So, and then of course there's the Indian tradition, or a ton of Indian people in in Durban specifically. I think they were, what was the history there? They were brought up, many Indian people were brought over as indentured servants. So of course a difficult history, but then there was, some traditions there that were trying to be incorporated, and Daniel worked very hard to try to get, more of a range of music represented, because we were in Durban, we were in South Africa, and so many different cultures were colliding there. And for a long time, that orchestra, while apartheid was still happening, was playing only dead white composers, as they say, which of course is most of the art form. But as it was integrating into the society, it's kind of we were trying to change it. They were trying to change it a little bit. So it's a really kind of fascinating history of an orchestra in a very diverse place.
Yeah, were there local
Sorry.
audio okay?
Yeah, no, I was just saying we arrived in 2013, and 2014 we were celebrating the 20th anniversary of the end of apartheid. So everything was very fresh, and for those students who don't know what apartheid, it was the white minority government that had set up a government that separated, essentially would not allow the Black South Africans to be in certain parts of the area, and kind of segregated off the country that way. So this is a very fresh, very raw experience for everybody. So everybody that we met was alive and living through this change that happened in their country. Whereas us as Americans, this happened many generations before, Joanna and Mr. Thomason and I. But our parents certainly experienced that.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be really, really interesting. Crazy to be there during that time. Just within a generation of apartheid ending.
Yeah.
It was children born there. It was just the coming of, when we got there, it was just the coming of age of one generation that had not experienced apartheid. But of course, we all know that remnants of something like that go on for many, many years. So I'm sure they felt other, limitations, but officially the apartheid had been. It was considered by the government at that time, the Dutch government, it was considered that the only way that everyone could live safely together was to keep everyone apart, which is an interesting idea, but of course not.
Incredibly oppressive.
Yeah, incredibly oppressive.
Yeah. You said you had a chance to include indigenous music. Were there composers that you had a chance to work with directly with the orchestra? How did you incorporate indigenous music in South Africa?
Yeah, so there were a number of very talented composers. I think the most famous one is, and let me see if I can do it correctly, Inisela Sibisi. That's my Zulu for you.
He's really good at it. He learned like some conversational Zulu. He's much better than I was.
And so the orchestra would we took two paths. One path was to pair up composers of traditional music with orchestra arrangers, and try to develop music that way. And then the other path was just pay for the music education of people who were interested in it. And out of that came a whole crop of very talented Black South African composers who blend, the music that they learned at university with the music they learned growing up.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
It was a pretty amazing energy with the young people playing that we came in contact with, who would play with the orchestra. They did a lot of improv together, and they have, as you can probably imagine, really impeccable rhythm, just based on, better than anyone I've ever met, including myself, just really, really, just very like deep inner. So just to see those traditions.
That sounds incredible. What a great experience. And so you were there for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds really cool.
we got this beautiful apartment right on the water, and it was
Remember-
really special, really special.
Yeah. Well, selfishly, I'm glad that you guys are much closer now, only a few hours away from where I am. So, and
2 hours, but we can't visit each other.
I know.
Yeah, world is changing.
Now, you both met and actually where our school district is with the, correct me if I'm wrong, the Rochester Symphony Orchestra. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. We were both guests of the Rochester Symphony Orchestra. I can't remember. Was it a church somewhere in Rochester?
It was in a church.
I can't remember where I was there.
They were auditioning me as to be their next conductor and music director, which they didn't offer me, but that's fine because we had a wonderful experience elsewhere. And she was playing a concerto, the Mendelssohn violin concerto, and was love at first sight.
It was. We met at a restaurant that was always Daniel's favorite.
Shout out to the Bistro Bordeaux.
Bistro Bordeaux.
Which doesn't exist anymore. But.
But I remember Daniel had me go. The flute was always the flute. Sometimes the winds and I were not together, so he had me go stand in the middle of the orchestra so we could all play together more closely, so we could hear each other better. It was good.
Right.
We got it together.
Well, it sounded great when I was there. I know that, and the rest is history between the two of you. But now you are obviously in the Columbus Symphony, and I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit about, Joanna, your role as a concertmaster and how that relates to the conductor, the orchestra. How is that different than being maybe in another position in the orchestra?
Well, it's as your students probably do have experience with, the playing an ensemble is everyone has a specific role, just like a sports team. So, for example, or any sort of team really where people kind of have to collaborate, work together. So the leadership positions, the principal positions in the orchestra, so they're in every section in the orchestra. You have the principal strings, so you have the principal viola, for example, principal cello, principal second violin, principal bass, and the principal first violin, which is called the concertmaster. Then, of course, you have the principal oboe, you have the principal timpanist. So there are people leading sections in the orchestra, and the concertmaster is simply first and foremost the person leading the first violin section, which means that you are kind of physically and musically showing the arc of the music, making decisions about how things should be played, kind of taking the music and boiling it down to a more physical attribute so that everyone can really play in a unified way. So that's done a lot physically. Sometimes it's done by speaking to the section. When things aren't quite maybe lining up, or people aren't really making the same musical choices. So really you're trying to, the 2D players in your section are trying to follow what you're doing. And, there's also collaboration. If people aren't agreeing, then of course there can be talk about what's happening. But generally it's like kind of a feeling of someone leading a section. So that's the first thing. Now the concertmaster is also leading kind of the string sound. So then you would also be you're responsible for doing the same thing, but in a larger way for the string section, and then ultimately for the entire orchestra. So physically trying to translate the music director's hands, the conductor's hands, and what he or she is doing into visceral sound that everyone can kind of be doing together. So there has to be kind of a physical leader, and that would be the concertmaster's job.
Sounds like a big responsibility, yeah.
Yes, it is, and it's not easy. But at the end of the day, I always have felt that I would prefer to be making more musical decisions rather than, being more of a follower, which is, it's not good or bad. Some people I'm not very good at being in a 2D position. I kind of always stick out a little bit. I'm not very good at kind of just really being exactly precise with what's happening around me. I'm better at kind of making more decisions on the fly and kind of leading musically. I feel that that's really more my strength. So I've always kind of felt more comfortable in a position, although there is a lot of different kind of work involved, because you really have to almost have the music memorized, and not just your part, but the whole orchestra's part and how everything fits together. But I always feel more comfortable in that position. So I think that's why I ultimately found myself in more of a leadership position.
Awesome. We watched a little bit in my class about when you had an opportunity to play Paganini's violin.
Oh yes,
And
that was very exciting.
Well, I mean, your interviews and those things, just you seem super excited. What was the process? How did you even? I mean, the orchestra. I don't know if Dan was involved in that, or
yeah, I think Daniel can speak to that.
How did you? How did you get that, and what did it feel like to play on that instrument? Go ahead.
So this was a project that was it was born out of we are sister cities. Columbus is sister cities with Genoa, Italy, and Genoa, Italy is where Christopher Columbus is from. So that was the first sister city that Columbus, Ohio reached out to as being, not that Christopher Columbus obviously never made it all the way inland to Columbus ever, but that is obviously the namesake of our city. So our city council members took a trip to Italy and heard actually, and to Genoa, and amongst all the activities that they did, they heard this violin be performed. And one of the city council members, Priscilla Tyson, who absolutely loves the orchestra and is a big champion of the arts in Columbus, said, and she doesn't play an instrument herself, but she just adored this instrument and said, I want to bring that to Columbus. And at the time, everybody was like, you're crazy, but she stuck on it, and she just kept saying, we're bringing this instrument to Columbus.
This project was ongoing when we moved here, right? Which was the fall of 2016.
Yeah, so we moved here in 2016, and one of the first things that happened was I was shoved into a meeting with city council members and told to make this work, and I was like, all right. And we worked on it for 3 years. It was a lot of
lots of
diplomacy and negotiations and translating paperwork from English to Italian and Italian to English, and trying to figure out how we get this thing, which is technically owned by the country of Italy and a national treasure that is valued at $25 million. How we get that from there to here and have somebody play it.
I think it was $35 million.
It was a lot of million. Who knows? It's a number that I will never see in my life. So, and it was quite an amazing thing. So, and it was a cultural exchange that included, they brought over a whole delegation of people to talk to give presentations. There was a pesto competition, because if you've ever had pesto, that green sauce that is made out of basil on pasta, that is originated from Genoa, Italy. So we did a pesto competition in Columbus and sent over the winner to Italy to compete in the international pesto thing. So it was this wonderful cultural exchange, and the culmination of it was bringing this violin to Columbus. It was on display at our art museum, and then the Columbus Symphony got to do a concert of it with the violin, which Joanna played. And what was it like?
Well, it was a little bit like it was surreal, I would say. I don't think that like I was saying about this quarantine a little, not that you can really compare them, but I don't think that I really understood really the impact and just the really amazing nature of this experience until after the fact, because I was really focused on trying to, do a very good job. If you don't sound good playing on Paganini's violin, it's really not the violin's fault. So I was trying to just really do a good job. So I was practicing a lot. I was practicing a lot beforehand. I only got to practice on the instrument for a total of probably about 5 hours, 3 hours on the Monday and 2 hours on the Tuesday. And then the concert was Tuesday night. So I didn't even get the violin because of transportation reasons. They can't really, they request that they don't move the instrument very much, or they request they don't move it more than is necessary. So I didn't get to even play the instrument in the rehearsal with the orchestra. I only got to play the instrument by myself in the museum for about 2 hours. And then I had this giant press conference in the museum. And then the next day I got a few more hours in the hall. So they only transported the instrument once. But the day that the first day, the Monday where I had the practice time, there was a big kind of press ceremony with the unveiling of the instrument and then the handing over of the instrument, and the curator of the instrument, he was able to set up the instrument with my strings and my shoulder rest and my chin rest. So, and of course I used my own bow. So these things really did help. And I have played Guarneri instruments before, so I wasn't entirely a novice to like what to expect. But what you really want, but the thing I was really thinking about was how I was going to adjust to this kind of monster instrument as quickly as possible so that I could feel comfortable and then again do a good job. So all these things were going through my mind. But of course, being handed this priceless antique was very exciting. It was like breathtaking. And then I just, you know, I couldn't linger on it too much because I really just had to play like a bunch of scales and just kind of try to get to know the instrument.
I think.
How old was the instrument? Do you remember?
What's that, Keenan?
How old is the instrument? Was it?
I knew then, but now I don't know. Yeah,
I
this
think
is,
it's
yeah.
late
Yeah.
18th century.
Okay, I think last time I looked it up. I don't know if it's current, but it was like 276.
Yeah.
276 years
Yeah.
old. So when you're talking about priceless antique.
Yeah. Well, and it showed to us what music can mean for a community. The concert was sold out, almost 3,000 people in a giant hall, and it really drummed up a lot of support from different people around the sector, around Columbus, that wouldn't normally go to an orchestra concert and wouldn't normally get to experience this type of thing. So it kind of shows that music and what you all are doing has this cross connection value in a society, that it's a very important thing, and it's a cultural thing. It's something that you can gather people around behind and really celebrate as a community together. It was
really magical. It was really, Rustin, our music director, and Daniel curated a really great collection of music. It was, the idea was, it wasn't a heavy concert. It was more of like a celebratory concert. So really fun, some like flashy music. I played some, of course I played Paganini music, among other things, showpieces, and really beautiful, more popular classical music that the orchestra really shone. And so it was just really very fabulous and very fun. And I think it was an enjoyable. It was like fairly shorter concert. And then there was the mayor of Genoa and the curator of the violin kind of handed the violin to me, and then at the end I put it back in the case, and so there was a dramatic. So it's just like Daniel said, it goes to show that if you really, if you know how things can connect to people, it was really it turned out to be a great success for lots of reasons.
That's incredible. Really, really amazing. We have some questions from the kids, if you wouldn't mind answering.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Some of the questions they're asking are, how many instruments do you play? Or do you just play your main instrument? Is that all?
Just me?
Oh, both of you.
Both of us. Okay. I play the violin, but I also play the viola. In my life, I've played a lot of chamber music on the viola, which I find very interesting. Sometimes even more fascinating to be that middle voice. I love the viola. I own a viola. I've played less viola since I came to Columbus because of course, my job is very demanding for my violin playing, of course. So, but any chance I get, I will try to just maybe read or play a little viola because it's really helpful. It's also really helpful going back and forth because it really kind of shows you the different sounds and kind of, going back to the violin is a little easier, and going back to the viola from the violin is also interesting. So anyway, it just gives this really, really neat, I don't know what the word is, kind of juxtaposition of the instrument. So I do that. But other than that, I don't play anything else. I'd love to, I always wish I love to sing, but I sound terrible. So.
I'm sure my violists are grinning from ear to ear right now. My violists are probably grinning from ear to ear.
Oh yeah. No, viola is really, it's a very special instrument. You have a lot of control over color. Oh. Yeah, he's okay. So maybe we've reached our limit with our toddler. Daniel's gonna go check on him. So
Okay, of course, of course. Do you have a few more minutes?
yes, of course. He might just bring him down, so he might just watch a show. So it's fine. So no
Okay.
problem.
Not a problem.
So as long as.
A couple more questions here from the students. I think you already answered a little bit about when you first became interested in music, and then you just said you've just since you picked it up, right?
Yes, I think when you're young, like when you're a child and you're doing something so demanding, I can't say that you always know what you're doing and why. I think I knew that it was. I think I knew it made me different, and I think I knew that I had like kind of a knack for it, which made me feel like I should just keep going. And, hi, Lovey. And I think but I really never thought, I really felt like I could, contribute something with my music, contribute something with my playing. I felt like I could, really say something with the instrument. And I think that's kind of what kept me going through all of the, some of the years are hard. There's lots and lots of practicing to do, and there's lots of loneliness. You're doing it by yourself, you're missing out on activities. And, it's not easy, but I always felt like I could really do something good with it. So I never really thought I would stop. Seriously, I just kept going.
That's awesome. I feel the same way. It's not always easy, but it's just,
it's
that
worth it, I think.
To it, that, yeah. Elliot, all right, Dan?
Oh, he's good.
He's here. Do you want to see Elliot?
Does everybody want to see Elliot?
Say hi, Elliot.
Dan, there's a question. Somebody asked the difference between classical and acoustic guitar.
Oh, I think it's just there's no major differences. They're all the same strings, all the same, whether it's electric, acoustic, classical. So it's just the nylon strings on the classical guitar, and it's a little bit fatter of an instrument. I don't know why. I should know why. That's a question I should know about, but I think it allows you to play the classical repertoire a little easier than the steel string, which I think is better for folk and rock and all that.
More resonance, maybe? Does it give more resonance?
Yeah, just more versatility.
Would you say less strumming, more?
Yeah,
looking?
Exactly.
Excellent. I just have a quick question, and then would you be willing to maybe play a little bit? Joanna?
Yes, sure. What would you like me to play? Anything or?
Whatever whatever. Sounds fun to you, whatever's fun for you. But I was wondering if you could give a little insight into like what before you play, what it would be like a normal. I mean, if we were actually back to work, what a normal week before a concert. Like when would you get the music? How long did you have to play it?
Sure.
Stage.
Maybe just no, take them over there. So we have orchestra concerts on Friday and Saturday night. We do the same program. And in terms of when I get the music, I'll start working on a program. Well, I review the bowings months before to make sure the bowings kind of go with what I think will work. So I do that in the summer. So that's like way beforehand. And then in terms of like really learning and internalizing the music, I'd say I get the music maybe 2 weeks before the concert. And then, by that, and we start rehearsing on, let's see, generally we'll have like maybe 4 or 5 rehearsal sessions, which are like 2.5 hours each, I think. So we'll have like 1 rehearsal Tuesday, 1 rehearsal Wednesday, 2 rehearsals Thursday, something like that. But by that Tuesday, I'll have obviously learned all the notes, really kind of internalized what's happening in the score. And I study the score a lot. I absolutely also all the time play along with recordings of orchestras that I know kind of align with the vision of our music director, kind of like what his experience and kind of interpretation would be. So I try to get all the pieces in place so that when I get to that rehearsal, there's no technical issue that I'm having. Like everything can be brought to that next level, which would be really refining the musical interpretation. So that would mean that, like, you know, I'm barely counting rests because I know what's happening in all the other parts. And, you know, if something happens there's a mistake that happens, then I can like kind of steer things back to help correct and that kind of thing. So I try to be, I mean, you know, we have a lot of music to do. So, you know, I can't say that I always get everything to that, you know, perfect level, especially things like family concerts, children's concerts, where you have one rehearsal and then like 7,000 pieces to play. But I, you know, as I go along, I get better at it. And because mostly in my life, most of my life, I haven't played orchestral music. It's more new in my life. So, you know, the past 10 years or so, I guess, something like that, maybe less, 5 to 10 years. But anyway, that's kind of my level of preparation, where I'm not thinking of anything technical in terms of playing my part. Everything is kind of on that level. So then we play the concert Friday, Saturday, and sometimes we have a third concert on Sunday. And then, yeah, it kind of depends on the week, but we have like on weeks and off weeks.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. We would love to hear you play on your,
yes, sure.
Maybe your instrument is not new either. It's
No, this is my instrument. This is a Gaetano Venaccia violin. It was made in Naples in 1819. And I've had this instrument since I started practicing to audition for conservatories. So I think I got it when I was 17. We've kind of, you know, we looked around, and you go to a few, there's a lot of really good dealers. Well, there's good, you know, generally in the big metropolises. So New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, probably like LA, there's different, you know, and at the time, I think, I don't know if sometimes they'll send instruments around if you're looking to buy an instrument. So I've been playing this violin since then, except for, I think it was maybe around 7 years, I played a Viom violin. It was on loan to me from a foundation in Chicago. So that was really wonderful. And it did help me understand like how to really approach the Paganini Del Gesù, because it was modeled on a Del Gesù. So I kind of knew the biggest thing about playing such a fine instrument in my experience has just been how to manage the unbelievable output that you get. Because you don't have to try very hard, and it like goes, it gives you this gigantic sound. So managing that is kind of, so I kind of had a little bit of experience of that with this Viom that I was playing. But then, you know, as you grow out as being a young artist, then you give the instrument back and someone else uses it and that kind of thing. So, but anyway, I guess I could play for you a few bars of the concerto that Daniel and I met playing, the Mendelssohn violin concerto. I guess I'll play the beginning of the last movement, kind of like the intro, and then maybe the beginning of the last movement, like, I don't know, a couple lines. Is that okay?
Well, that's perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for applying for us.
Of course.
Beautiful,
I
beautiful.
hope it was enough. Was it enough?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So thank you so much. Well, I don't want to keep it too long. I know Elliot's probably ready to play and keep you guys
He's
busy.
having a snack. And
He
eating
is
food. He's
just
fine.
gangbusters today. No nap, I guess.
You
No
know,
nap. All right. Well,
yeah. I'm convinced that kids just know when you have something going on, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, right. He
They
just
sense
knew
it.
that, the more eager you are for him to go to sleep, the more he doesn't want to go to sleep.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Daniel and Joanna, for joining us, and the RCS community. Students, thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the sunshine. Hopefully you have sunshine like we do here, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, we are the rain's clearing up, so the sun's coming out. So
All
I'll
right.
just leave you guys with one thing. So last year we did a survey of kind of 30 community leaders here in Columbus. Politicians, business leaders, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And we found that 26 out of the 30 had played an instrument when they were growing up. And of the top CEOs in Columbus, there's actually what's called the CEO band. And these are guys that make between $5 and $15 million a year. And they get together once a month and they play in a band. The electric company CEO plays trumpet. The gas company CEO plays piano. And so these people, they're business leaders. They're very smart people, but they all have music as part of their lives. And they started at a young age like you in your classes with Mr. Thomason. So stick with it because it could influence you in ways you don't even know.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Music just connects all of us, doesn't it? It's just
It
incredible.
really does.
That's
it really
true.
does. It's bigger.
That's true.
It's bigger than you think.
Yeah, it transcends just about everything.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. We really appreciate having you on, and
thanks for having us. Really nice to see you.
our pleasure. It's great to see you, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person soon.
Yes.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.